This is the Stronghold Digital Mining Daily Update. Today's Wednesday, June 14th, 2023. There are quite a few data points that we're going to try to go over today. So let's begin with something that I think is really relevant and that builds upon what we spoke about yesterday. So right now, according to the dashboard, not sure if this is going to be able to show up on screen clearly or not. If not, I'll put a screenshot up. Stronghold total revenue estimate as of 3:55 p.m., $15,887.20 per hour. That's the kind of number we want to hopefully start seeing, and which, needless to say, right, is highly dependent upon our input revenues being more favorable. Now, this happens to be a particularly interesting it's a sort of an interesting situation because basically BTCMW, right, that's like Bitcoin priced in dollars per megawatt hour, is about $85, which in and of itself is, well, I mean, that's great, actually. That we need that, right? But what's also going on, and this is where this hypothetical, or at least it's like a theoretical possibility, it's not clear if we actually are able to technically do this, but the system operating status says Scrubgrass is generating electricity and selling it to the PJM grid and also importing PJM electricity to mine Bitcoin. Whereas Panther Creek is generating electricity to mine Bitcoin and selling excess electricity to the PJM grid, which is a more typically sort of like standard way of doing things, right? We're always going to be somewhat connected to the grid, even if we're diverting most of our electricity to Bitcoin mining. But in the case of Scrubgrass, with PJM-Penelec prices at the moment, right, of $57.86, and BTCMW at 85.10. So, again, what's theoretically possible is that we can sell electricity to the grid at about $58, right? Which is great. That's a very healthy margin above and beyond, our net cost of producing electricity, and certainly far above our variable cost of producing electricity, which is about $32 per megawatt. But then the question becomes, hey, okay, we're selling electricity into the grid, we're generating revenue that way, right? Profitable, useful revenue that way. Can we simultaneously import electricity from PJM-Penelec, at least, to then power the data center to mine Bitcoin for about $85, right, in terms of BTCMW? That spread is very, very lucrative, right? I mean, between, say, roughly 60 to 85, I think it's a very healthy margin. So if we're able to do that, we're compounding our potential revenue, which, and in all cases, it's like very profitable revenue. So I find that to be very intellectually interesting, and I think it would merit perhaps a little bit of discussion at our forthcoming investor presentation. Hey, if we can't do it, so be it. I'll make an adjustment to the dashboard so that we're not potentially calculating that as a possibility. But if we are able to do that, I think that presents a very interesting situation, just mathematically. Okay, let's put up the slide. Let's take a look at the 24-hour averages. PJM-Penelec, $22.53 over the past 24 hours. PJM PP&L, averaging about $20.50. BTCMW, that's definitely been going higher. We're up to $78.97 on average. And Bitcoin spot prices over the past 24 hours, about $25,938. The network hash rate over the past 24 hours has averaged 355. That's down from like 391 yesterday. Okay, back to me. So, we seem to be trending in the right direction insofar as those really mission critical input variables. Now, let's try to put up a slide. This is going to be a slide shared by @Brian Hegg on Twitter. Brian is one of my collaborators, so to speak, right? Where we all kind of get together and really try to think about Stronghold Digital Mining and some of the economics and metrics surrounding the company. So Brian shared this slide that demonstrates that the price of diesel has come down quite dramatically from a year ago. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to supplement what he shared with something else that I found. We'll put that up on the screen right now. So it shows that the average price of diesel in Pennsylvania specifically is just a little bit over $4, whereas it had been, I mean, practically almost like $7 about a year ago. Okay, back to me. Now, another collaborator on, the collaborator is a strange word to use, but another friend of the company on Twitter is at Capcent Research. And Capcent shared I think a very interesting sort of like graph, and let's go and put that up right now. So this has to do with ammonia prices. And specifically, Stronghold Digital Mining evidently makes use of the Tampa ammonia benchmark. Let's phrase it that way. And so as we can see, that the cost of that has gone down quite a bit as well. Okay, back to me, please. And I do distinctly recall Matt, our CFO, mentioning, actually, I don't remember if it was in the most recent investor presentation or which one it was, but like Tampa ammonia was actually mentioned. So the reason why I'm sharing this, why am I talking about diesel fuel prices and ammonia prices? What does that have to do with anything? Well, it actually has a lot to do with some of the costs which I referenced yesterday. Remember how we talked about in Q1 2023, we had this is like a rough approximation, say like $24 million in kind of like core operational expenses, that being fuel, operations and maintenance, and general and administrative. So when we see things like diesel prices coming down and like ammonia prices coming down, those are numbers that are moving in our favor, which could portend for potentially like slightly lower costs as we wind up, the end here of Q2 2023. And if that trend continues, we might see potentially lower costs going into Q3. So that's why I'm sharing that. Now, there's something else I'd like to share. Yet another slide, I know. Okay, let's put up this slide. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is essentially, like my hand drawn, or at least my hand highlighted, sort of like representation of the PJM-Penelec zone in the grid. And what we're also looking at is essentially what's superimposed on top of that is like a map of the state of Pennsylvania. And it shows the various counties that either fully or partially fall within PJM-Penelec. Now, Homer City coming offline, and bear in mind, these numbers are all based on nameplate numbers, okay? For example, in Somerset County, there are a lot of wind farms. So, for example, that might be an instance where, okay, nameplate capacity of a particular power plant may be one thing, but hey, how much electricity is actually being generated at any given moment of time? That's not so clear, at least just based on this sort of superficial analysis that I performed. But basically, PJM-Penelec is going from about 9.93 gigawatts of nameplate capacity. Once Homer City comes completely offline, at least based on nameplate numbers, we'd be dropping by about 20% to 7.9 gigawatts. Okay, back to me, please. Now, the reason why this is relevant is because Scrubgrass happens to be within PJM-Penelec. Scrubgrass has a nameplate capacity of 85 megawatts. Yes, we can kind of like overclock it, probably go to maybe 110% of nameplate capacity, but that incurs it's sort of like a cubed relationship, my understanding is, to then maintenance expenses. So let's just, for simplicity's sake, say, hey, we're an 85 megawatt power plant. Homer City, to the best of my understanding, is about 2.2 gigawatts, but over the past several years has probably only been operating at, say, roughly maybe, 15 to 25% of capacity, simply because, grid prices just haven't been there to support, full operations. That's probably true for other plants within PJM-Penelec as well. Again, this was sort of like, version 1 superficial analysis. It does look like overall capacity is dropping by about 20%, bearing in mind, though, that yes, Homer City hasn't been running at full capacity, but it's plausible that a lot of other plants haven't necessarily been running at full capacity. So it's unclear to me exactly how many gigawatts of electricity, generally speaking, are produced by plants within PJM-Penelec. That's probably a better number to use insofar as an analysis of, hey, on average, how many gigawatts are being produced rather, and then like with Homer City coming offline, what's the differential, and what could that mean as we head into the warm summer months, where we could potentially have spikes in energy usage, which would then in turn spike grid prices. And with Homer City not being there anymore to help support the grid, that could potentially point to situations where, scrubgrass can maybe pick up some extra, useful revenue, right? So we're going to have to watch this very carefully, probably do some further analysis, but just, I wanted to at least share that as like a step one bit of research into like what's going on. And by the way, what I did just for clarity and transparency, there's a list of power plants on Wikipedia, which I then cross-referenced county by county to see which ones kind of fit into PJM-Penelec. Not saying it was a precise process, but at least, it gave us something to begin working with. So there's that. In terms of the Federal Reserve, which we referenced yesterday, so the Fed, so to speak, has decided not to raise interest rates now in the month of June, but has signaled evidently quite aggressively that the game plan, for the future could include 2 additional rate hikes. I'm not a professional poker player. In fact, I don't even play poker that much, if at all anymore. But I do wonder if there's a bit of bluffing going on here. I mean, with the banking sector already cracking, at least certainly in the United States, I think there's a plausible question as to how much more can markets really take of this. I'm not arguing that, hey, in many ways, it's a very healthy thing, right? There has to be, I think we need real interest rates. And arguably, the best way to obtain real interest rates is to have the market determine what interest rates are, not a very well-intended, incredibly intelligent group of individuals, right? Who, as best as they may try to determine what an appropriate interest rate is, that could be very challenging and very difficult. Ideally, we just have the markets, right, determining what interest rates should be at. But absent that, we have the Fed. They're doing the best they can. And so we'll have to see what happens. I'm a little bit doubtful as to whether or not at this point we're going to actually see any further rate hikes. If anything, it wouldn't surprise me if we perhaps see some loosening. And I'm not saying that that's because inflation is going to somehow vanish, but rather, again, there's a lot of pressures placed upon this this entity called the Federal Reserve, right, from a variety of different stakeholders, and it could prove to be very challenging to kind of keep going forward with rates. Not saying they may not do it, right? It's possible. I'm just a little bit doubtful as to whether or not that's going to take place. So we will have to wait and see. Okay, did I cover everything? I hope I did. This has been a little bit of a lengthy video, but again, a lot of things were shared here. As always, let's stay positive, let's be great, and we'll see each other again tomorrow.